A woman lies in a hospital bed, her newborn son still warm against her chest, when her husband hands her divorce papers, completely unaware that 1 month later, a notification on her phone will reveal she now legally owns his entire billion-dollar empire. What happens when the man who abandoned you discovers you control everything he ever built? Julianne Pruitt spent 12 years as Walker Jay's wife, watching Seattle's elite whisper behind champagne flutes about her empty womb. She endured the fertility specialists, the failed treatments, the monthly heartbreak. She swallowed the humiliation when Walker's eyes began wandering toward women who could give him what she couldn't. Then, impossibly, she got pregnant. For 9 months, she carried hope alongside her son. She imagined Walker's face when he held their child. She imagined becoming a family, finally, truly. Instead, hours after the most excruciating delivery of her life, Walker walked into her hospital room with divorce papers and a lawyer. He wanted his freedom. He wanted to live without the weight of a wife who'd failed him for a decade. What Walker doesn't know, Julianne just inherited his entire empire. If you're already hooked by what's coming, hit that subscribe button, because this journey is about to get unbelievably intense. I learned to make myself small in a world built for giants. 12 years. That's how long I'd been Walker Jay's wife. 12 years of standing beside him at charity galas in the Columbia Tower Club, champagne flutes catching the light, Seattle's skyline glittering behind us like we were untouchable. 12 years of smiling while women in designer gowns whispered just loud enough for me to hear. Still no children? What a shame. Such a waste. They said it like I hadn't tried, like I hadn't spent a decade in sterile examination rooms with my feet in stirrups and my dignity somewhere on the floor, like I hadn't swallowed hormones that made my body feel like a stranger's, like I hadn't held my breath every single month, hoping, praying, bargaining with God, only to see blood and feel my heart crack a little more. Walker used to hold me on those nights. Early on, when we still touched each other with intention, he'd wrap his arms around me in our king-size bed and whisper that it didn't matter, that we had time, that we had each other. I believed him. I don't know when that stopped being true. Maybe it was year 5 when his mother started making comments about family legacy over Sunday brunch. Maybe it was year 7 when he stopped coming to the fertility appointments. Maybe it was year 10 when I caught him looking at me like I was a problem he couldn't solve. The contract was signed in year 2. I remember because we just moved into the penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, marble everywhere, the kind of place that echoes when you cry. Walker had been drinking whiskey, celebratory, talking about the future. His lawyer, Edward, had drawn up some documents. Estate planning, Walker said. Just paperwork. I'd read it. Every word. One clause buried in the middle. In the event that Julianne Pruitt bears Walker Jay a male heir, all assets, holdings, and corporate control shall transfer to Julianne Pruitt until said heir reaches the age of majority. Why this clause? I'd asked. Walker had laughed, kissed my forehead. Insurance, baby. Protects you. Protects our future son. Not that it matters. We'll have 10 kids by the time we're 40. I'd signed it. Set a yearly reminder on my phone, like a digital birthday candle for a wish that never came true. Every October 7th. Contract anniversary. Still waiting. Walker forgot about it the moment the ink dried. I never did. Now it's 12 years later, and I'm sitting in Dr. Christina Reeves's office at Swedish Medical Center, staring at an ultrasound screen I've stared at 100 times before. I'm prepared for the apologetic smile, the gentle suggestion to try acupuncture or adopt or just accept that some women's bodies don't cooperate. Instead, Dr. Reeves turns to me with wide eyes. "Julianne," she says, and her voice cracks like she's witnessing a miracle. "You're pregnant." The room tilts. My hands go numb. What? She's smiling now, tears in her eyes. 10 weeks. Strong heartbeat. You're going to have a baby. I don't remember how I got to my car. I just remember sitting in the parking garage, rain hammering the windshield, and finally, after 12 years of silence, screaming. The first person I told was Jackie, not Walker, not his mother, Margaret, not anyone from his world of polished smiles and sharp edges. I called Jackie Haugen, my best friend since college, the only person who knew what the last 12 years had actually cost me. She cried. I cried. We stayed on the phone for 2 hours, and for the first time in forever, I let myself feel something close to awe. Telling Walker was different. I'd planned it carefully. Dinner at home, his favorite meal, candles, the whole scene. I'd even practiced the words in the mirror like some nervous teenager. But when he walked through the door at 9:30, smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't the brand he wore, I just blurted it out. I'm pregnant. He stopped mid-step. His briefcase slipped from his hand, hitting the marble with a crack that made me flinch. You're sure? 10 weeks. I saw the heartbeat. Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or calculation. Not joy. Never joy. He crossed the room and hugged me, but his body felt stiff, obligatory, like he was embracing a business partner after closing a deal. That's great, Jules. Really, that's great. He didn't ask how I felt, didn't ask to see the ultrasound photo I tucked in my wallet. He poured himself a scotch instead, staring out at the rain-soaked city, and I realized with a sinking feeling that I was celebrating alone. The pregnancy was brutal. Morning sickness lasted all day. My body ached in ways I didn't know were possible. I spent weeks on the couch, too exhausted to do anything but exist. Walker was gone most of the time. Business trips to San Francisco, late meetings downtown, conferences that stretched across weekends. When he was home, he was somewhere else. I'd catch him staring at his phone with a half smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Once I heard him laugh in his office. The real kind, the kind that used to be mine. When I asked who he was talking to, he said, "Just Dustin from the board." But his eyes didn't meet mine. I wasn't stupid. I knew. I just didn't have the energy to fight. Month 5, we went to a gala for the Seattle Arts Foundation. I wore a black maternity gown that cost more than most people's rent, and I felt like an imposter. Walker's business partner, Camden Matthews, congratulated us with the kind of enthusiasm a Walker should have had. His wife, Christine Persaud, touched my belly and gushed about nursery colors. Walker stood 3 feet away, talking to a woman in red, blonde, young, laughing at something he whispered near her ear. Margaret noticed. Walker's mother always noticed. "You're glowing, dear," she said, her smile sharp as the glass. "Though I do hope the baby inherits Walker's features. Strong genes, you know." Translation: I hope your child doesn't look too much like you. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried in a stall that smelled like lavender and money. Month 7. I asked Walker to come to an appointment. Just one. The anatomy scan. I wanted him to see our son moving, hiccuping, fully formed and real. He said he'd try. He didn't show. I sat in that ultrasound room alone, watching our baby's tiny heart beat on the screen, and I made a promise to myself. I will be enough for you, even if he isn't. Month 9 arrived with Seattle's relentless autumn rain. I was massive, exhausted, and terrified. I nested obsessively, washing tiny clothes, organizing the nursery, reading parenting books at 3 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. Walker spent more nights at his downtown office than at home. The night my water broke, I was alone. I called him 17 times. 17. Each one went to voicemail. I texted, "Baby's coming. I need you." Nothing. I called Jackie, but she was 2 hours away in Spokane visiting family. I called 911, and a kind paramedic with tired eyes held my hand in the ambulance. "Is your husband meeting you at the hospital?" she asked. "Yes," I lied, because the truth was too humiliating to say out loud. Labor lasted 18 hours. 18 hours of my body tearing itself apart, of nurses with sympathetic faces, of me screaming into the void for a man who didn't come. He finally walked through the door at hour 17, not in scrubs, not frantic or apologetic, in a tailored navy suit, like he'd just left a board meeting. Edward, his lawyer, was with him, also in a suit, carrying a leather briefcase. My vision was blurry with pain and exhaustion, but I saw them clearly. Two men in expensive fabric, standing at the foot of my hospital bed like I was a transaction to complete. "Walker," I gasped between contractions. "You came." He didn't smile, didn't rush to my side, didn't take my hand. "We need to talk," he said, and that's when I knew. Before he said another word, before Edward opened that briefcase, before my son even entered the world, I knew. This wasn't going to be the beginning I'd imagined. This was the end. I don't remember much about the last hour of labor. Pain has a way of erasing everything else. Time, dignity, hope. My body was doing something it was built to do, but felt like it was breaking in the process. Nurses moved around me like ghosts, their voices soft and encouraging, but I barely heard them. All I could see was Walker standing against the far wall, checking his phone, not pacing, not holding my hand, not whispering that everything would be okay, just standing there in his perfect suit, scrolling, while I split open, bringing his son into the world. When they finally placed my baby on my chest, I forgot Walker existed. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair plastered to his tiny head. He didn't cry at first, just blinked up at me with unfocused eyes, and I swear to God, I felt my heart reconstruct itself around him. Every piece that had shattered over 12 years fused back together, different than before, stronger. "Hi, baby," I whispered, my voice wrecked. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting so long to meet you." He made a small sound, and I started crying, the ugly kind, the kind that comes from a place so deep you didn't know it existed. A nurse, her name tag read Carly Irwin, smiled at me. "He's beautiful. Does he have a name?" I looked at Walker, waiting for him to step forward, to claim this moment, to suggest the name we discussed months ago when he still pretended to care. He didn't move. "Braden," I said softly, choosing the name my father would have had, the father I never knew. "His name is Braden." Walker finally approached, but not to see his son. He nodded to Edward, who stepped forward with that leather briefcase, and my stomach dropped. "Julianne," Walker said, his voice flat, businesslike. "We need to handle some paperwork." I was still holding our son. My body was still trembling. There was still blood on the sheets beneath me. "Paperwork?" I repeated, my brain struggling to process. Edward pulled out a folder. Walker wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm filing for divorce," Walker said, like he was announcing a stock split. "Edward has the documents. You'll be provided for. Child support, a reasonable settlement. But I think it's best if we end this now, cleanly, before it gets more complicated." The room went silent. Even the machines seemed to stop beeping. "You're divorcing me?" My voice came out small, broken. "Right now, Walker, I just gave birth to your son. Our marriage has been over for years, Jules. You know that. He said it so casually, like our 12 years together were nothing, like I was nothing. You signed a contract, I whispered, but even as I said it, I knew he didn't remember. 2 years in, you signed ancient history. He cut me off. Edward reviewed everything. That contract has loopholes. You'll be fine. The baby will be fine, but I'm done. If this story is hitting different than you expected, subscribe now because what happens next will change everything. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. He didn't even look at Braden, not once. Didn't ask to hold him, didn't touch his tiny hand, didn't acknowledge the miracle we created. He just stood there, already checked out, already gone. Edward placed the divorce papers on the hospital tray, right next to a cup of melting ice chips. If you could just initial here, and sign at the bottom. Get out, I said. Walker blinked. Jules, get out. My voice cracked, but it was louder this time. Braden stirred against my chest, sensing my distress. Get out of this room. Get out of my sight. Don't you dare stand there in your $1,000 suit and hand me divorce papers while I'm still bleeding from bringing your son into the world. For just a second, something flickered in Walker's face. Guilt, maybe. Shame. But it vanished as quickly as it came. You have 48 hours to review the documents, Edward said quietly, like I hadn't spoken. After that, we'll proceed with or without your signature. They left, both of them. The door clicked shut, and I was alone with my son in a room that smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams. Carly came back, her eyes wet. She didn't say anything, just adjusted my pillow, checked Braden's vitals, squeezed my shoulder with a tenderness that made me sob harder. You're going to be okay, she whispered. I don't know how yet, but you are. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But right then, holding my newborn son while divorce papers sat inches away, I felt like I'd never be okay again. I'd survived 12 years of emptiness thinking a baby would fix everything. Instead, the baby I'd prayed for had become the reason Walker felt free to leave. Braden made a small, sleepy sound against my chest. I looked down at him. His perfect face, his tiny fingers curled into fists, and something shifted. Walker had thrown us away like we were nothing, but maybe, just maybe, we were about to become everything. I just didn't know it yet. The first month was a blur of feeding schedules, sleepless nights, and a kind of loneliness I didn't know existed. Jackie came when she could, bringing groceries and staying up with me during Braden's 2 a.m. crying sessions. She'd hold him while I showered, the first time I felt clean in days, and she never once said, I told you so about Walker, even though she'd been right about him all along. Walker's lawyer sent papers. I didn't sign them, not out of hope. There was no hope left, but because I couldn't bring myself to care. The papers sat on my kitchen counter, collecting coffee rings and baby formula stains, while I existed in a fog of survival mode. I moved out of the penthouse. Couldn't stay there, not with its marble floors and echoing silence and memories of a marriage that never really was. I found a smaller place in Capitol Hill, cozy, walkable, with a nursery that actually felt like a nursery instead of a museum display. Jackie helped me pack while Braden slept in his carrier, oblivious to the fact that his entire world had shifted. Walker never called, never texted, never asked about his son. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself Braden and I were better off. I told myself a lot of things at 3 a.m. when I was pacing the floor with a crying baby, wondering how I'd ended up here, alone, exhausted, discarded like something broken. Some nights I believed it. Most nights I didn't. October 7th arrived on a gray Seattle morning, the kind where the rain feels personal. Braden was exactly 1 month old. I was on the couch in yesterday's clothes, trying to convince him to take a bottle when my phone chimed. A reminder notification. One I'd set 12 years ago and renewed every single year, half joking, half desperate, always believing it would never actually matter. Contract anniversary. Clause activated. Review cloud files. I stared at the screen, my brain sluggish from sleep deprivation. Then it hit me like cold water. The contract. My hands shook as I opened my cloud storage, scrolling through folders I hadn't looked at in years. There it was, a scanned PDF, professionally notarized, Walker's signature bold and confident at the bottom. Marital Asset Agreement, Walker J. and Julianne Pruitt. I'd read it 100 times in year 2, memorizing every clause, every contingency, but now, with Braden asleep against my shoulder, one section practically glowed on my screen. Section 4.2. In the event that Julianne Pruitt bears Walker J. a male heir, all business assets, holdings, investment portfolios, real estate properties, and corporate control of J Enterprises and all subsidiary companies shall transfer immediately and irrevocably to Julianne Pruitt, who shall maintain full operational authority until said heir reaches the age of 25 or 25 years. I read it again, then again. Transfer immediately and irrevocably. My heart started pounding. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. Walker's empire, his tech companies, his investments, his commercial properties across Seattle, his seat on half a dozen boards, all of it? I scrolled down, looking for the loophole Walker must have known about. The escape clause Edward had surely found. There had to be something. This was too clean, too absolute. But there wasn't. The contract was airtight. Walker had signed away everything the day I gave birth to his son, and he'd completely forgotten. I called Braden, not my son, my lawyer. Braden Foster, the attorney who'd handled my parents' estate years ago, the only legal person I trusted in a city full of sharks. He answered on the second ring. Julianne, everything okay? I need you to look at a contract, I said, my voice shaking. Right now. I'm sending it over. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Julianne. Braden's voice was careful, measured, the way lawyers sound when they're about to deliver life-changing news. Have you shown this to anyone else? No. Just you? Is it real? Is it enforceable? A pause. Then, it's not just enforceable, it's ironclad. Whoever drafted this knew exactly what they were doing. There are no loopholes, no contingencies, no expiration clauses. The moment you gave birth to a son, everything Walker J. owns became legally yours to control. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the couch, clutching Braden, my son, not my lawyer, closer to my chest. Everything? I whispered. Everything. J Enterprises, the downtown properties, his investment portfolio, his stake in every company he's touched. You don't just have partial ownership, Julianne. You have controlling authority. He can't sell, transfer, or make major business decisions without your approval. And given that he just filed for divorce, Braden paused. He has no idea, does he? He forgot, I said, my voice hollow. He signed it 12 years ago and forgot it existed. Then he's about to have a very bad day. I looked down at my son, sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling. 1 month old, and he'd already changed everything without knowing it. Walker had thrown us away, left us with nothing but child support and a reasonable settlement, whatever that meant. He'd walked out while I was still bleeding, handed me divorce papers like I was a problem finally solved. And now, because of a contract he'd signed in a moment of drunken optimism 12 years ago, I owned his entire world. The power was dizzying, terrifying. I could destroy him, take everything he'd built, Every company he'd grown, every property with his name on it. I could leave him with nothing, the way he'd left me. Justice would taste so sweet. But then Braden, my Braden, shifted in my arms, and I thought about what Jackie always said. Hurt people hurt people. Healed people break the cycle. What do you want to do? Braden Foster asked gently. I looked out my window at the rain-soaked Seattle streets, at the city Walker owned, at the empire that was now somehow mine. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I need to decide soon, because when Walker finds out, everything changes. I just didn't know if I had the strength to become the woman who could wield this kind of power, or if I even wanted to be her. I didn't sleep that night, just sat in the dark nursery watching Braden breathe, my phone glowing with the contract on the screen. I could ruin Walker, completely. Take everything he'd spent 20 years building and watch him scramble for survival the way I'd scrambled. Make him feel powerless the way I'd felt powerless. Make him understand what it's like to be thrown away. God, part of me wanted to. Jackie came over the next morning with coffee and that look, the one that said she already knew something had shifted. You're sitting too still, she said, handing me a latte. What happened? I showed her the contract, watched her eyes go wide, then narrow, then burn with something fierce. Holy shit, Jules. Yeah. You own everything? Everything. She sat back, processing, then, good. Take it. Take every last penny. That man served you divorce papers while you were still bleeding from childbirth. He deserves to lose everything. I wanted to agree. God, I wanted to agree. But I kept looking at Braden, sleeping in his bassinet, so small and innocent and unaware that his father had already abandoned him. He deserves a father, I said quietly. Jackie's face hardened. Walker J is not a father. He's a sperm donor in a three-piece suit. Braden deserves better than a man who couldn't be bothered to show up for his birth. I didn't have a father, I said, my voice cracking. You know what that did to me. The questions I had, the hole it left. What if Braden grows up asking why I kept him from his dad? What if he resents me for it? What if he grows up knowing you chose yourself? Jackie countered. What if he learns that people who hurt you don't get unlimited access to keep doing it? That's a lesson too, Jules. If you're torn about what she should do, drop a comment with your choice and subscribe to see what happens next. This decision changes everything. She was right, but so was the voice in my head that sounded like my mother, the woman who'd raised me alone, who taught me that family was everything, even when it hurt. I called Braden Foster again. I need to know my options, I said. All of them. He laid them out clinically. I could enforce the contract fully, taking complete control and leaving Walker with nothing. I could negotiate a settlement, returning some power in exchange for concessions. I could refuse to enforce it at all, though he strongly advised against that. Or I could restructure everything, take control, but use it to build something better. What do you want, Julianne? He asked. Not what's fair, not what's right. What do you want? I looked at Braden, my miracle baby, the son I'd waited 12 years for. I want him to have a father who deserves him, I said. But I also want Walker to understand what he threw away. I want him to feel what I felt. I stopped, because the truth was ugly and complicated and human. I wanted justice, but I also wanted grace. I wanted revenge, but I also wanted peace. I wanted to destroy Walker, but I also wanted to be the kind of woman my son could be proud of. I want to own everything, I finally said, my voice steady, but I don't want to become him in the process. Braden Foster was quiet for a moment. Then, that's the hardest path. You know, harder than revenge. Harder than mercy. I know. When do you want to tell him? I thought about Walker, probably in his office right now, making deals, sleeping with whoever was keeping him company these days, living his life like he hadn't just blown up mine. Tomorrow, I said. I'm telling him tomorrow. And just like that, I became the woman holding the match. The only question left was whether I light the fire or find another way to burn. I chose Walker's office deliberately, not a coffee shop where he could make a scene, not our old penthouse where ghosts still lived in every corner. His territory, his fortress, the 40th floor of the J Tower downtown, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, where he'd built his empire one ruthless deal at a time. I wanted him to lose it all in the place he felt most powerful. Braden Foster met me in the lobby at 9 a.m. sharp. I dressed carefully, a tailored black suit Jackie had helped me pick out, my hair pulled back, minimal makeup. I looked nothing like the broken woman in a hospital gown Walker had abandoned a month ago. My son was strapped to my chest in a baby carrier, sleeping peacefully against my heartbeat. You sure you want to bring him? Braden Foster asked gently. He's the reason this contract exists, I said. He should be here. Walker's assistant, a young woman named Emily Early, who'd always been kind to me, looked startled when we stepped off the elevator. Mrs. Julianne, does Mr. J know you're coming? He does now, I said, walking past her toward Walker's office. She jumped up. Wait, he's in a meeting. I opened the door anyway. Walker was at his desk, leaning back in his leather chair, laughing at something Camden Matthews was saying. Two other men I didn't recognize sat across from them, potential investors probably, based on the presentation displayed on the screen behind them. Everyone turned. Walker's face went through several expressions at once: shock, irritation, then something that looked almost like fear when he saw Braden Foster behind me. Julianne, what are you doing here? We need to talk. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Now. Camden stood awkwardly. We can reschedule. No, I said, not taking my eyes off Walker. They can stay. Actually, they should stay. Edward, too. Call him. Walker's jaw tightened. Jules, if this is about the divorce papers, call Edward, I repeated. Or I will. Something in my tone made him reach for his phone. 5 minutes later, Edward arrived, briefcase in hand, looking confused. I waited until everyone was settled. Then I pulled the contract from my bag and placed it on Walker's desk, right on top of his quarterly projections. October 12th, 2 years into our marriage, I said. You signed this. Do you remember? Walker barely glanced at it. That's ancient history. Edward didn't review it, I said calmly, because you didn't tell him it existed, did you? Edward leaned forward, picking up the document. I watched his face change as he read, from casual interest to confusion to something like horror. Walker, Edward said slowly, where did this come from? Some paperwork from years ago. It's irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. Edward's voice had gone very quiet. This is a legally binding contract, notarized, witnessed, and according to Section 4.2, he looked up at Walker, then at me. Did you give birth to a son? 4 weeks ago, I said, while Walker was serving me divorce papers. The room went silent. Camden shifted uncomfortably. The two investors looked at each other. Walker's face had drained of color. What does it say? Walker's voice came out hoarse. Edward read aloud, his lawyer voice flat and clinical. In the event that Julianne Pruitt bears Walker J. a male heir, all business assets, holdings, investment portfolios, real estate properties, and corporate control of J Enterprises, and all subsidiary companies shall transfer immediately and irrevocably to Julianne Pruitt. Walker stared. That's not. It can't be enforceable. There has to be a loophole. There isn't. Braden Foster stepped forward, placing his own folder on the desk. I've reviewed it thoroughly. It's airtight. The moment Julianne gave birth to your son, she became the legal controller of your entire empire. That's insane, Walker said, but his voice had no strength behind it. I would never sign something like that. But you did. I kept my voice level, even though my heart was hammering. You were celebrating. You just closed the Meyer deal. You were drunk on whiskey and success, talking about our future, about the 10 kids we'd have. You signed it without thinking because you never actually believed it would matter. Walker's hands were shaking. I'd never seen him shake before. You forgot, I continued, but I didn't. I set a reminder every year. I kept the files backed up. And now, Walker, everything you own, every company, every property, every investment belongs to me. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. Maybe I was finally becoming someone he couldn't dismiss. What do you want? He asked, and for the first time since I'd known him, Walker J. sounded small. I adjusted my son, our son, sleeping against my chest, felt his tiny warmth, his complete trust that I would protect him from everything, even his own father. I want you to understand what you threw away, I said quietly. I want you to feel what I felt when you walked out. I want you to know that the woman you treated like nothing is now the woman who controls everything. Walker's face crumpled, not with sadness, with rage. So this is revenge? You're going to destroy me? No, I said, and watched confusion flicker across his face. I'm going to do something much worse. I pulled out a second folder, handed it to Edward. I'm restructuring your companies, every single one. Fair wages for employees. Ethical partnerships only. An end to the corrupt deals I know you've made. You'll keep a position, consultant, minority stakeholder, but you'll never have full control again. And you'll have access to your son, because unlike you, I understand that a child needs his father. Walker looked gutted. You can't. I can, and I am. I met his eyes. You divorced me while I was still bleeding. You forgot you ever made me a promise. You threw away 12 years like they meant nothing. So now you get to live with the consequences. Not broke, not destroyed, but humbled, reformed, and always, always aware that the woman you underestimated is the only reason you have anything left at all. I turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Walker, next time you want to discard someone, make sure you actually read what you signed first. I walked out of that office with my son against my heart and Walker's entire world in my hands. And for the first time in 12 years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The restructuring took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of meetings in conference rooms where men in expensive suits looked at me like I was an anomaly they couldn't quite categorize. 3 weeks of Braden Foster by my side, translating legal jargon while my actual Braden slept in his carrier or nursed under a blanket. 3 weeks of discovering just how deep Walker's corruption ran. It was worse than I'd imagined. Offshore accounts to avoid taxes, partnerships with companies using sweatshop labor, real estate deals that displace low-income families, employees working 60-hour weeks without overtime, a foundation that existed only for tax breaks, donating pennies while claiming millions in write-offs. Walker had built his empire on the backs of people who couldn't fight back. You could expose all of this, Braden Foster said during one late-night session in my new home office. Tank his reputation completely. He'd never recover. I looked at the evidence spread across my desk, then at my son sleeping in his bassinet nearby. That's not who I want to be, I said quietly. Instead, I rebuilt. I started with employees, raised wages across every company to living standards, added benefits, real ones, healthcare that actually covered things, parental leave that didn't punish people for having families. I brought in Ann Caldwell, an HR specialist with a reputation for transforming toxic workplaces, and gave her full authority to root out harassment and discrimination. The board fought me. Camden tried diplomacy. Others were less subtle. "You're going to bankrupt us," one gray-haired executive said during a meeting, his face red. "No," I corrected. "I'm going to make us ethical. If your profit margins depend on exploitation, then yes, those margins will shrink. Adjust." They adjusted. Some resigned. I didn't stop them. I dissolved Walker's corrupt partnerships, ended contracts with companies that treated workers like commodities, took the financial hit, and absorbed it, because money built on suffering was money I didn't want. I turned the fake foundation into something real, funded fertility treatment for women who couldn't afford it, created support systems for single mothers, partnered with organizations fighting for women's health. Every month, I thought about the 12 years I'd spent broken and desperate, and I poured money into making sure other women didn't suffer alone. Jackie watched me work with something like awe. "You're actually doing it," she said one night, bringing takeout while I reviewed contracts. "You're not just taking his empire, you're making it better." "I'm trying," I said. "But God, Jackie, it's exhausting. Some days I want to burn it all down." "But you don't." "No." I looked at Braden, now 2 months old, staring at me with eyes that seemed to see everything. Because he's watching. And someday he'll ask what I did when I had power. I want to be able to tell him the truth without being ashamed. Walker, meanwhile, was living in the small reality I'd left him. He kept a consultant position, enough income to survive comfortably, but nothing like the wealth he'd known. He had an office, but not the corner one. He attended meetings, but didn't lead them. He watched me transform everything he'd built, and for the first time in his life, Walker J. was powerless. We met twice a week so he could see Braden. Supervised visits at first, at my insistence. Walker would hold his son awkwardly, like he didn't quite know how to be gentle, and I'd watch for signs that he might actually care. Sometimes I saw glimpses. The way his face softened when Braden grabbed his finger, the careful way he supported his head, the quiet awe when Braden smiled at him. Other times, I saw the resentment. The way Walker looked at me like I'd stolen something that was rightfully his, conveniently forgetting that he'd thrown us away first. "Do you hate me?" he asked once during a pickup. I thought about it, really thought about it. "No," I said honestly. "I hate what you did. I hate that you didn't value us. But you, I just feel sad for you. You had everything, and you didn't even know it." His face crumpled. Not in anger this time, in something that looked almost like grief. "I know that now," he whispered. "Too late," I said softly. "That's the part you're going to have to live with." The divorce was finalized on a gray December morning. I signed the papers in Braden Foster's office while my son napped beside me. Walker wasn't there. Didn't need to be. When it was done, Braden Foster looked at me with quiet respect. "How do you feel?" I touched my son's tiny hand, felt him grip my finger with surprising strength. "Free," I said, and I meant it. 6 months changes everything. 6 months ago, I was the woman lying in a hospital bed, holding divorce papers with shaking hands, believing I'd lost everything that mattered. Now I stood in front of floor-to-ceiling mirrors in my new penthouse, not the one I'd shared with Walker, but one I'd chosen myself in Belltown, watching my reflection like I was meeting someone for the first time. The woman staring back was a stranger. In a good way. "You look like you could buy the whole damn city," Jackie said from the doorway, grinning. "I basically can," I said, And we both laughed because it was absurd and true and still didn't feel quite real. Braden, my son, 6 months old now, was with his nanny, Melena Keener, a warm grandmother type who sang to him in Spanish and loved him like he was her own. Walker's visitation had expanded to unsupervised time, but only after 3 months of proving he could show up consistently, stay sober, and actually parent instead of treating their time together like a photo op. He was trying. I'd give him that much. But trying and succeeding were different things. The Seattle business community didn't know what to make of me at first. Walker's ex-wife who somehow owned his empire? The woman who'd been invisible at galas for 12 years suddenly running board meetings? They waited for me to fail, to crumble under the pressure, to sell everything and disappear. I didn't. Instead, I thrived. J Enterprises became Pruitt Holdings within 2 months, a rebrand that sent shockwaves through the city. I brought in Christina Chen as CFO, a brilliant woman who'd been overlooked for promotions at her last company because she had the audacity to be pregnant. Under her guidance, our profit margin stabilized despite my ethical overhaul. If this transformation is inspiring you, hit that subscribe button and share this story with someone who needs to see what rising from the ashes actually looks like. I hired Dustin Salisbury, a tech innovator Walker had rejected for being too idealistic, and his sustainable energy division became our fastest growing sector. I promoted Carly Irwin, yes, the nurse from my delivery, who turned out to have an MBA she'd never gotten to use, to head our new maternal health initiative. The foundation I'd built from Walker's fake charity grew exponentially. We'd funded fertility treatments for 247 women. 17 of them were pregnant now. Every time I got an email with a positive test photo, I cried happy tears that 12 years ago me would have never believed possible. I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone powerful, someone feared and respected in equal measure. Someone who walked into rooms and didn't apologize for taking up space. Some days, it felt like wearing someone else's skin. Other days, it felt like I'd finally grown into my own. Walker and I existed in a strange limbo, divorced but forever connected, enemies who had to co-parent, two people who destroyed each other, learning to be civil for the sake of a baby who didn't ask for any of this. Our exchanges were brief, professional, still edged with pain neither of us knew how to name. He said "dada" today, Walker told me during one pickup, and his voice cracked with something that sounded like wonder and grief mixed together. I know, I said gently. He's been practicing all week. Walker looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the question he was too proud to ask. Can we try again? Can we fix this? The answer was no, would always be no. The scar was too deep. When I looked at him, I didn't just see the man who'd left me. I saw every moment of humiliation, every whispered insult at galas, every fertility appointment he'd skipped, every night I'd cried alone. I saw him handing me divorce papers while I bled. Forgiveness didn't erase memory. It just made it possible to exist in the same room without drowning. He needs you, I said instead. Keep showing up. That's what matters. Jackie threw me a party for Pruitt Holdings' 6-month anniversary. Nothing extravagant, just close friends, good wine, and the kind of laughter that comes from surviving something you didn't think you'd survive. Speech! Someone called out. I stood, holding my glass, looking around at the women who'd held me together. Jackie, Christina, Anne, Melena. Women who taught me that strength wasn't pretending you didn't break. It was breaking and choosing to rebuild differently. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over, I said, my voice steady. I just lost my marriage, my identity, everything I thought defined me. And I was terrified. Terrified of being alone, of failing as a mother, of not being enough. I paused, feeling the weight of how far I'd come. But somewhere between the hospital room and here, I realized something. I was never failing. I was surviving. And surviving isn't weak. It's the bravest thing we do. So this isn't just a celebration of a company. It's a celebration of every woman who's been told she's not enough, who's been left behind, who's been underestimated and decided to prove them all wrong. The room erupted in cheers. Later, alone in my penthouse with Braden sleeping in the next room, I stood at the window looking out at Seattle's glittering skyline. Walker's name still lit up buildings across the city, but they weren't his anymore. They were mine, and I turned them into something better. My phone buzzed. A text from Walker. "Thank you for letting me be his father. I know I don't deserve it." I stared at those words for a long time. He was right. He didn't deserve it. But Braden deserved a father, and I deserved to be the kind of woman who chose grace even when it hurt. I typed back, "He needs you. Don't waste this second chance." Then I deleted his number from favorites, poured myself tea, and opened my laptop. Because tomorrow, I had an empire to run, and I was just getting started. They say the first year of motherhood changes you. They don't tell you it might also be the year you completely rebuild yourself from the ground up. Braden turned one on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after the reminder that changed everything. I threw him a small party, nothing like the elaborate events Walker's family would have insisted on. Just Jackie, Milena, a few close friends, and Walker, who arrived on time with a carefully wrapped gift and eyes that still held apology. My son smashed cake into his face, laughing that pure belly laugh that made everything I'd been through worth it. Walker took photos, smiling genuinely for the first time in as long as I could remember. For a moment, it almost felt like we could have been a family, but we weren't. And that was okay. After everyone left and Braden was down for his nap, I sat in the nursery, the one I designed myself, painted in soft greens and blues, filled with books instead of expensive things meant to impress people. This room was about love, not status. My phone lit up with a notification. Seattle Business Journal, Julianne Pruitt, named one of most influential CEOs, under 40. I scrolled through the article, seeing phrases like revolutionary leadership and ethical business transformation attached to my name. A year ago, I would have thought they were talking about someone else. Now, I knew they were talking about me. Pruitt Holdings had just closed its most profitable quarter, proving that ethics and profit weren't mutually exclusive. Our employee retention rate was the highest in the industry. Our maternal health foundation had funded treatments for over 400 women now. 32 babies had been born because of resources we provided. 32 miracles. I'd turned my pain into purpose. But the real transformation wasn't in the balance sheets or the headlines. It was in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman from a year ago, the one who'd made herself small, who'd apologized for taking up space, who'd believed her only value was in becoming a mother. That woman had been surviving. This woman was living. Walker requested a meeting in the next week. Not about Braden, about business. He'd been developing something on his own, a small tech startup, and wanted to pitch me for a potential partnership with Pruitt Holdings. We met at a coffee shop in Pike Place Market, neutral territory. Both of us in business casual instead of armor. "You didn't have to take this meeting," he said, stirring his coffee nervously. "No, I didn't." I looked at him, really looked. He changed too, less polished, more human. Humility looked strange on him, but not entirely bad. "But I'm curious what you've built." He pitched his idea, an app connecting small businesses with ethical suppliers, cutting out exploitative middlemen. It was good, really good. The kind of thing the old Walker would have never touched because the profit margins were too slim. "You've changed," I said when he finished. "Had to." He met my eyes. "Losing everything teaches you what actually matters. Took me too long to learn it, but I'm learning." Before we get to the ending, drop a like if this story has moved you and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like this matter. I considered his proposal. Part of me wanted to say no just because it was him, but that would have been petty, and I'd worked too hard to become someone better than that. "I'll have Christina review the numbers," I said. "If it's solid, we'll talk terms. But Walker, this is business, not reconciliation." "I know." He nodded, and something like relief crossed his face. "I'm not asking for forgiveness anymore, Jules. I know I don't get that. I'm just trying to be someone my son won't be ashamed of." That, at least, I could respect. Weeks passed. Autumn turned to winter, Seattle rain became Seattle snow, and life found its rhythm. Braden started walking, stumbling around my penthouse with determination that reminded me so much of myself. Walker had him every other weekend now, and I'd stopped checking my phone anxiously during those visits. He was proving himself, slowly, imperfectly, but consistently. I'd started dating. Nothing serious, just remembering what it felt like to be seen as a woman instead of just a mother or a CEO. It felt strange and new and sometimes terrifying, but also like reclaiming parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. On a gray December afternoon, exactly 1 year after my divorce was finalized, I stood in my office looking at the contracts spread across my desk. Walker's startup partnership, expansion plans for the foundation, a speaking invitation at a women's leadership conference. My assistant knocked. "Miss Pruitt, your 4 o'clock is here." A young woman entered, barely 25, clutching a folder. She looked terrified. "Hi," she said, voice shaking. "I'm Taya Morrison. I I received funding from your foundation for IVF, and I wanted to show you." She pulled out an ultrasound photo. Twins. I stood walking around my desk. "May I?" She handed it to me, tears streaming down her face. I tried for 7 years, 7 years of everyone telling me to just adopt, to give up, that maybe it wasn't meant to be. Your foundation gave me hope when I had nothing left. And now, she broke down completely. And I did something I never would have done a year ago. I hugged her, let her cry on my shoulder, and cried with her. "You're going to be an amazing mother," I whispered. When she left, I sat back at my desk and let myself feel everything. The pain of the past, the power of the present, the possibility of the future. I'd spent 12 years believing my worth was tied to a man who never valued me. Spent months thinking my life was over because he'd thrown me away. But Walker hadn't destroyed me. He just revealed what I was capable of becoming when I stopped shrinking myself to fit into his world. That evening, I picked up Braden from Melena's. He reached for me immediately, saying "Mama," in that way that still made my heart explode. "We did it, baby," I whispered into his hair. "We survived. We're thriving. And we're just getting started." My phone buzzed. A text from Jackie. "Drinks tomorrow? Celebrate you being a complete badass?" I smiled, typing back, "Always." Because that was the thing about reclaiming everything. It wasn't just about the empire, or the money, or proving Walker wrong. It was about looking at your reflection and finally, after years of doubt and pain and breaking, seeing someone you were proud to be. Someone strong enough to forgive, but wise enough to set boundaries. Someone powerful enough to destroy, but graceful enough to rebuild. Someone who'd learned that the deepest kind of love wasn't romantic. It was the love you gave yourself when no one else would. I was Julianne Pruitt, mother, CEO, survivor, architect of my own damn destiny. And my story, it was only just beginning.